Project Lawful aka Planecrash by Arwayne aka Eliezer Yudkowsky and Lintamande. The Woman of Irori, Episode 188.
When Carissa wakes, she's in one of Abigail's suite of lovely non-doompunk bedrooms, again, and Abigail is asleep beside her. A second after that, while she's still trying to blink the image in front of her into coherence, someone tries to read her mind. She lets them. It is almost certainly a condition of having nice things, such as waking up next to a beautifully asleep and vulnerable Abigail, that Abigail's security can see at all times she continues to have no intentions of committing regicide. She lets the stupid part of her brain that says she will not overthrow Abigail because of how Abigail is so pretty, the prettiest, be a little louder than usual, in case it is helpful towards that end. It feels like she's grown so much she barely fits into this body. It helps when she looks in the mirror that the body is almost wholly unfamiliar. She is soul-souled now, and compacted with Asmodeus shoot hopefully, Abigail's security is allowed to know about that, and nearly as enhanced as magic can make a person. And she went to a party full of Chelish nobles and had a lovely time and picked out the worst person there and hurt him and enjoyed it. Asmodeus may or may not have had any genuine prediction in mind about her when he instructed her to deliver him victory in his contest with Irori, but he was in fact right, that she is someone who wants things she can only have in hell, that she is his, that no mercy from some other god could make her otherwise. She has, to put it mildly, somewhat mixed feelings about Asmodeanism, the ideology, but it's relatively clear what her path is from here to change that. Once she's conquered most of the world, then those souls in it which choose her get her, and whether the church likes it or not, by that point she'll be aggressively publicizing what it means to choose her. She sits down, then, and tries to rederive the Keltham seduction plan, and doesn't come up with anything, and is troubled by this, but only slightly. It seems nearly impossible that Greater Carissa's intent in building Lesser Carissa into this was traitorous. And, well, if it was, she can simply not defect. That's within her power. When Abigail wakes, she is wholly lost in stubbornly trying to hang a fifth circle spell.
Abigail Thrune comes awake, notices that there's somebody in bed with her who isn't powerful enough to be a direct threat, and in sheer reflex, before her brain is even awake enough to remember who's there, stretches in a languorous and sensual fashion. It only takes a few seconds to remember who and why, but she's already taken the correct action on reflex.
Carissa successfully distracted.
Well, then she'll arise out of the bed and begin to clothe herself in the fresh clothes that shall have been laid out for her there, making a needlessly artistic production out of that. Simultaneously, Abigail Thrune silently requests an update on any overnight disasters through one of her permanent telepathic bonds. Detect thoughts, greater magic aura to disguise it. It's almost a single action to her, but with true arcane sight, Carissa is still liable to notice the act before the disguise completes. How is her further improved creation doing this morning?
Well, right now she's just thinking about how Abigail is very pretty, the prettiest. If Keltham is getting accurate intel about Cheliax, he could probably trigger that contract provision, by now. Maybe that was her Keltham seduction plan. I think I came back from Hell Fifth Circle. I'm not sure, won't be until I get the spell hung, but it feels easier. It feels like the magic's moving more naturally.
Well, maybe Carissa could pass a truth spell about that if she's deluding herself hard enough. Abigail obviously doesn't say it. It seems a good delusion for Carissa to have temporarily. So much good news. It makes one to fear the tropes, if nothing at all has gone wrong, Abigail states. Why, who knows what doom you'll find when you return to the project. I sent Pilar back ahead of you, obviously.
How much nonsense could they possibly have gotten up to in... How long has it been, actually? She doubts that time in Dispater's realm is particularly beholden to time on the material.
You came back the evening of the day that you began at dawn. Thankfully, I have foreboding news to report that's not about your project. This, we may hope, has fulfilled the trope's need to present us with a disaster after things went so well. Our spies say that Keltham has accepted the Kellish Empire's offer to supply him with spells, items, scrolls. It was plausibly immediately after he would have learned you were selling your soul.
Huh. What would my selling my soul even have changed for him? I don't understand it, but I don't like it. What have they supplied him?
That's harder to be sure of. There's a 9th Circle caster of Sarenrae with whom they trade favors. Chelish intelligence thinks she is preparing to travel imminently based on echo effects around Sarenrae's temples. An administrator to replace the priest who'd be temporarily replacing their Grand High Priestess. They could supply him with a Poly 6 intelligence headband if he doesn't have one already. They could possibly supply him a bound genie if he has the wish diamond for it, which, if we're lucky, Keltham will use only for +1 intelligence and not for destroying Cheliax. If he's gone back on only dealing with lawful evil people, it implies some change of plans. The question is from what to what? Looking at it from what might be Keltham's own perspective, he has just lost Asmodia, followed immediately after by Carissa.
Do you think I should be preparing to go to him even if I don't know what my original plan was? It does not seem worth taking a chance on his destroying Cheliax.
I believe you should take a day or two to think, Carissa, with your new crown, before we decide that the tropes have given us no choice but to fly blind into your seduction plan. But I also think it is your own call now. You are relinquished of Irori, and there must come a time when you tell me that you're making the next move of your game, and I trust you in it.
Nod. I'll check in on the project then, put it in better shape to potentially manage my extended absence than it was last time. Think with the new headband about Alani making, Keltham seduction, Caden Kalian, what Nethys does that gives him almost prophecy, assembly lines for Gisid rings of sustenance. I was thinking, what magic item could we give almost everyone that'd be too useful to do without? And I'll let you know the next move, once I know it.
Drop me a note if you want to visit Igorian, or Absalom for that matter. At this point, it's going to take a mind blank and 8th Circle escort to make sure nobody simply kidnaps you once you're outside of Forbiddance, by means up to and including wish spells. We might as well go together if we go. Disguised, obviously.
Is Abigail just being friendly? In a friend way? No, she's probably misparsing it. I expect if nothing catches fire, I will want to visit Absalom in a week or two. It's getting embarrassing never having been. And I imagine we could have some fun. Disguised, of course.
You don't need to be friends with somebody to enjoy the thought of escorting her through a dangerous-looking part of town. Looking weak, and what she'll do to those who offend her. Unless you're Pilar Pineda, in which case feelings of friendship are required to power your most effective special abilities. I asked Aspexia Rugaton if the Asmodean injunction against pity still applied when the victim was Pilar Pineda having to put up with this, and Aspexia Rugaton had to think for a round before she said yes.
I'm pretty convinced at this point that the silliness of Caden's intervention is meant to distract us from something, but this realization has helped not at all with figuring out what we're being distracted from.
I think he's possibly just that kind of god and doesn't have a choice, but he may yet use his domain of frivolity to distract us so long as he has to do it anyhow. I must be about annexing Nidal, Carissa. You can linger about my palace, do you wish, if you need an hour's true rest, but for myself, I must be about my way.
Goodbye then, Your Majesty, and good luck. If you miss me, kill some people I'd specifically find annoying, and I'll feel very thought of.
That's still not a permitted way for proper Asmodeans to relate to each other, but all things considered within the Carissa Savar seduction plan, to which Abigail is minister, as much as Carissa Savar was to Keltham. Abigail isn't going to say that to Carissa until later. She'll kiss Carissa thoroughly instead, and be off about her way.
Right then, she too should be getting back to work. She may have only been away from the project for 1 day. She's pretty sure subjectively the time in hell was at least thrice that. But people can be very much idiots in 1 day.
Abigail Thrune heads off to work, and wonders, in the back of her mind, if she's done Carissa Sevar more service than disservice in her life, and would be permitted to go to her someday if she entered into hell calling her name. Well, she's definitely done Carissa more service than disservice by the standards of hell. One more reason to conquer at least Aveston, though it's not like she'd need any reason at all.
Carissa Savar returns to Project Lawful, Beautiful, Terrifying, wearing an artifact out of hell on her head. She explains that she sold her soul to Dispater for a price the church would like her to not disclose at this time, and then went to the Queen's celebration of Nidal's surrender. No one questions her. Her priority for the day is trying to get Pilar's candidate, Ilani, to notice the thing about the world where all its features are connected, where every observation tugs 100 invisible strings, where if the spell silver process gets slightly worse when you substitute eggshells for bone, then that's almost as informative as if it got slightly better, but also where if the price of a good is puzzlingly high, you had an error elsewhere in your picture of the world, where the question isn't whether anything has been proven or even whether anything is suspected, but whether anything is likelier in one world than another. If she has time, then she's also going to try to convey the intuition that if there's a vendor who sells out of his goods 3 hours earlier than anyone else, there needs to be an explanation for that which isn't just his are higher quality, and that if countries go to war, that's confusing because it suggests two opposed people believed they would benefit from something that would superficially appear to benefit only one of them, and the whole general complex of habits of expecting things to be in balance, and, when they're not, seeing why not. She's no Keltham, as a teacher, by which she means that she remembers near perfectly everything he said and can refer to transcripts, and also has something like 6 splendor on him at this point. Her Ilani ought to learn faster.
She'll get about an hour into that before some poor security fool has the temerity to interrupt Carissa Sevar's important work with a supposedly very, very urgent message. There's a gate to hell at the edge of their forbiddance and a cornigon. Greater devil could probably slaughter this whole facility, who wants to see snack service within the next 2 minutes.
Well, that does seem kind of urgent. Go ahead, Pilar.
She knows what this is about. On her way very quickly before the gate closes.
Tell Mr. Dispater it was a pleasure doing business with him.
The mighty devil speaks not one word of acknowledgement to this before the gate closes about it. From the beginning it never stepped foot in Galarian.
And Pilar returns and pulls away her commander to report. Lady Sevar, I have good news. Possibly. Sort of.
Well, go ahead.
Snack service permits me to tell you that it received of Dispater a +6+6+4 headband and a +4+6+6 headband. It says that these are the property of snack service, and it is very important that they stay the property of snack service, because if Hell sells or gives them to Cheliax, including by proxy or what looks to the treaty definitions like a hellish plot, it comes out of Hell's intervention budget and will get charged to Cheliax. Whereas so long as these headbands stay the effective property of snack service, their uses come out of Caden Kaleen's intervention budget, supposedly. Also, they're going to be used in a very important way to benefit Asmodeus, supposedly. I asked if Project Lawful could borrow the headbands in a friendly way without paying, if Snack Service wasn't using them right away. Snack Service says sure, and we can have them for at least the next 24 hours. It doesn't make any guarantees past that point. If you don't have a better idea of what to do with them, sir, I suggest that we pass them around our potential Ilani and try to teach them very intensively for a couple of hours each to see if they can get probability sight via artifact headband the way Asmodea did. Only without the heresy and treason, hopefully.
What are you playing at, Caden Kaleen? Sure. Sounds like fun. Don't worry too much about the heresy and treason. Heresy and treason are incorrect. Proper Elanism won't take you there. We'll correct you promptly. But if there are thoughts you're trying not to think in the first place, rather than thinking them knowing they'll be corrected if they're wrong, it can be harder to master Islandism.
I'll tell them so, sir, but I register that they're not Asmodea. If my curse obeyed me and my curse worked, they'll think those thoughts without hesitating, and speak those thoughts, because they want to be corrected and want to stop being muddled inside, and will understand if that means they need to be punished.
I hope that's so, but even you, Pilar, have found yourself muddled on occasion.
I asked my curse for them to not be me, sir.
To be less, what?
Less good. To not have any huge cracks in them where they didn't want their family going to hell.
Would you have not wanted your family going to hell? If you'd had more confidence, hell would find the strength in them?
Asmodeus doesn't want me to care. I guess I didn't put it exactly in those words. To my curse, there's only so much you can ask, when you've only got one planet to pick from, and you're looking for people who already speak Taldane besides. But I was looking specifically for people who could be Ilani and Asmodeans, and I did not tell my curse to premise that on your form of Asmodeanism, sir, because I was acting on my own, and I thought, I don't want somebody like that breaking down if Sivar never comes back. I'm not the best possible version of what I am. I don't believe the tropes made the one best person on the planet to be a keeper of Asmodeus end up in Ostenso. Somebody like that wouldn't have fit into the story they were weaving around Keltham. These people should be the real thing. Once they get training, what Pilar should have been for Asmodeus. That's what I asked, wanted, for my curse to find.
All right, we'll see if they can handle it then. If they can't, better to know that sooner anyway.
How much of the day and night should I plan on having you for? With Asmodea gone, I think you're the only one here who still has what she called probability sight for the new Ilani candidates to pick up using the artifact headbands.
I can do this all day. This is actually where it all stands or falls, probably not in some party in Agorian.
As you say, sir. Pilar doesn't like the driven and domineering person she turns into when she wears the +D6 Splendor headband. It feels tantamount to insubordination to make so many suggestions to her superior. Her feelings are irrelevant. Pilar will go on wearing this headband until her superiors tell her to take it off.
Or until Pilar realizes that she can serve Asmodeus better by taking it off.
Fuck off and die, but yes.
Carissa resumes her lecture. I think trying to do this on test cases where you know that there's something to be found trains only a part of the skill, and perhaps the least valuable part. The important thing is noticing it where it hasn't already been pointed out to you. But let's try some test cases anyway, just in case it at least helps develop the habit. You're a general. You need to know if the enemy army is moving to attack at the North Pass or the South Pass. They might feint to try to trick you. They might split their forces, but they probably won't. It's a gamble, and if you handle it right, they'll lose both. You hear a report they've given their soldiers orders to make for the North Pass, but the report could be a lie to deceive you. What features of reality are you looking for? What are you trying to see to figure out what's going on?
Ex-criminal wizard student who received his wish to have his criminality beaten out of him. Wayne. There's just sight, sound, and magic, isn't there? You can try to scry the pass or the approaches, and even if scrying is blocked, if it's blocked in one place but not the other, that tells you. You can post lookouts and check in with them, and if they fail to check in, that's a sign, because absence of expected evidence is evidence of absence. Or do you mean things on a bigger timescale, like, if one pass is muddier, you see if they requisition supply wagons with wider wheels?
How many troops are in the report? Were famous elite warriors spotted?
Smoke from fires and refugees. They're less likely if there's a feint, too.
Actual attacks at either pass suggest not feint, unless they're unsupported summons, which implies feint.
Whichever pass is more vulnerable, they're likely to attack.
That's Priors, you fool, she asked for evidence.
If they can't fit their whole army in one pass, dividing their army is more likely.
Also fucking Priors.
A lot of this depends on the quality of your reconnaissance. Do you have lesser planar allied imps for recon? Or other invisible teleporting summons with good senses?
That's a factor that affects which evidence you get. It's not something that you look for. Am I the only person who understood the question here?
Carissa is testing a new theory about humans, that they bullshit themselves and everyone around them slightly less when the topic is winning a battle that will happen tomorrow. The World Wound was better than Cheliax, and she thinks the real concrete consequences were why. There's only so much you can play who's the evilest if you will all die of not doing your jobs. Were there rapists and thugs and bullies at the World Wound? Yes, absolutely. Were there people who put inordinate effort into elaborately entrapping people, or addressing slights to their honor, or doing the evilest thing they could think of? No. The demons did Cheliax a favor and ate those. There's some good ideas there. Now, Anilani, listing off all of those, asks how much evidence are they? How much more likely are we to hear a spy report they're going north, if they're going north? How trustworthy are our spy reports? How hard would it be for them to have sent us lies, compared to how likely it is that if they're truly marching north, we'll hear it? For any bit of evidence, you can think of reason it's conclusive, or think of reason it's a feint. But what you want to do is ask which world it's more consistent with, and by how much. Does anyone want to try venturing for some of the evidence they came up with? How strong it is as evidence?
So for something like what kinds of wagons they're requisitioning, I think it's maybe like almost even if somebody comes and tries to sell you a report like that, because they could just be trying to plant information. But if you had a lot of different things like that, you could check from different sources and you gotta pick one at random, instead of there being only one obvious thing for your spies to try to learn from one obvious source. Then I think it'd be much stronger, like 4-1, or even more than that, because realistically war involves not that many faked spy reports. I've never heard of a case where an enemy tried to fake somebody out completely by adjusting 100 little things like that.
Pilar storms into the classroom, bearing artifact headbands. Pilar has never really been all that comfortable with correcting other students in class. Until now. Now everything is fine, for real, and not like she was pretending to herself before, because Pilar knows these people can take it. Pilar hates that she works like that, but she does. The new Ilani will be better. All right, you muddled, incoherent pieces of slime. Sudden new plan for the day. One of you at a time gets intensively tutored by Carissa Savar while wearing a +6+6+4 headband for an hour, then by Maritzel while wearing a +4+6+6 headband for an hour, and then you get a +6 intelligence headband for an hour to go think about it by yourself. You can hang around and listen to other people learning, if you want, but don't fucking interrupt them. This is how Asmodia got her probability sight, more or less, and we're hoping the same happens with you. That kind of boosting has caused other people out of Cheliax to go traitor. You, theoretically, are supposed to be better than that, if my curse worked correctly. If that theoretically is wrong, speak the fuck up about it. If you're afraid of being punished even though you're not supposed to be afraid, say that. Carissa Savar will decide what do about that, using options that potentially include not punishing you for it so that you retroactively won't have been afraid to speak out. Bad thoughts can be corrected easily. Being afraid to think is much harder to correct. If you're finding yourself afraid to think, something is going wrong with our lesson plan and we will do whatever it fucking takes to correct that, with options that potentially include running detect thoughts on you and hurting you until you start to think again, or fucking not hurting you at all if predictably hurting you would have caused you to never admit to yourself in the first place that something was wrong. Raise your hand if you fucking understood that.
Classroom Irori. About a third of the hands go up.
Fun. Well, maybe you'll understand it once you're wearing a fucking artifact headband. We'll start with you, Montserrat. This is a +6+6+4 headband. Put it on and don't fucking argue.
Rosal Montserrat. Irori. Yes, sir. She wasn't really planning to argue, but she's not going to argue that either. Oh, this is going to be a bitch to take off again, isn't it? She says. One of the nicest things about being evil is that she can swear at people all she wants now.
20 hours later, Carissa is prepared to declare, no, she's not declaring anything. That's how the tropes get you. It went well, though. Pilar's selectees are smart and motivated, and they in fact have better habits of thought than people who grew up in Cheliax, which is awkward for whoever designed the present Chelish educational system, but Carissa doesn't care much about that person. The headbands are useful for, well, they're concretely useful for grasping concepts more quickly, and noticing muddles more quickly, and connecting ideas more quickly, and they're less concretely useful for making people feel like the kind of person who can do mystical things from an alien planet. Carissa increasingly suspects that an essential ingredient, with Keltham, was that he wasn't just delivering the lectures, he was delivering the treasured lore of a powerful, impossibly distant civilization. He was delivering a story in which they would master a new art, and As a fact about humans, maybe also a fact about devils. That's more motivating, more powerful. It makes it feel possible to achieve anything, and it makes it actually possible to achieve more. Putting on an artifact headband delivered directly from hell serves the same purpose anyway. The kids, some of them are older than she is. The kids are doing well. At this rate, in a few days, she'll be able to explain her work on corrigibility, and one of them will have a useful insight, and she'll have something to show off to Aspexia Rugaton, while she makes a fuss about how the church should let her say, truthfully, that you might come to Carissa Sevar in hell if you cry out for her. She was going to think about Caden, Kaleen, and Keltham, and maybe have one last spirited go at hanging a fifth circle spell, but she's asleep the instant her head hits her pillow. Knowing you're on the right track is great for that.
Pilar goes to sleep shortly after, reminding herself that it's acceptable for an Asmodean to feel proud. Even if all of this is a long game by snack service to crack her open after deceiving her in Elysium about how difficult she was to crack, even if the +4 +6 on +6 headband is for herself, and it turns her into a traitor like Asmodea, even if Lord Despotter sealing off her mind from simple detection was just part of Snack Service's plan, Cheliax will survive. Hell will triumph. These new candidates are not as flawed as Pilar, unless everything about her curse, including the magical feedback sensations, are lies. Asmodeus will have his Alani and his keepers no matter what.
The next morning, security may be concerned to hear from Carissa Sevar's quarters a whoop of utterly undignified glee. Was it the best use of 4 hours of her precious time? Absolutely not. Is it important at all? In an objective sense, not really. But Carissa Sevar hung a teleport! Technically, many places don't count you as fifth circle until you can prepare a full slate of spells, including a fifth circle one, which she cannot. This scaffold is a goddamned mess, and the teleport messily drooped on it is the only thing she'll have prepped today, but, right, she's got her students waiting. The plan for today was a morning lecture about how Keltham broke the conspiracy. As a useful object lesson Carissa happens to have particularly in-depth information on, and then an afternoon spent preparing the plan for if duties call Carissa elsewhere. So it's less of a shit show than it was last time. She can still fit it all in, more or less. Gather around, little Ilani, and hear the tale of Project Lawful's greatest success and greatest failure, as they are, after all, the same tale. It's a very dramatic one. You'll want to take lots of notes. Some details are elided for confidentiality reasons, but not all that many of them. Everything Ione knows, and everything Keltham knows, is known by Cheliax's enemies already, after all. She skips lunch. She's riding a wave of glee, and anyway, no longer needs to eat. She spends 2 hours patiently writing an org structure and plans for various contingencies, poking her teleport on the scaffold and watching it jiggle. And then 2 hours writing up an org structure and contingencies, because it is, actually, important. Pilar is her second-in-command on the Ilani project, and should also make judgment calls related to tropes or conduct towards researchers generally. Meritxell is on the Ilani project after Pilar. She actually did pick up a fair bit from Keltham's keeper training, doesn't seem to have broken about it, and is reasonably able to pass it forwards. Carissa's glad they didn't send her after Keltham, though slightly confused about how that call was made. Possibly there's something more to Meritxell than she's been assuming. Put it on the list of things to think about once she has some time. About halfway into writing this document, she realizes that the obvious person to assist her in this task is Mayal. And the reason she hasn't called him in for it is that she doesn't want to face the fact she damaged him, and now he's worse. Well, the nice thing about being a coward is that once you notice, you can just stop. She orders Mylol sent in.
Mylol's remains, the inner party, Iarwine. The effects of torture, as Carissa Sevar did once observe, are not linear. Mylol has been tortured by Gorthoklek, but under conditions where he knew Gorthoklek was an expert and would not break him. And Mylol only needed to not endure. He broke immediately, but just hang around hurting and broken and screaming and not trying to do anything else. When Carissa Sevar tortured him, it went on, and she was not an expert, and visibly did not know how to be careful even if she wanted to, and Mylol did not know what she wanted from him or how long it would go on. If the Chelish system was throwing him away now, if he was being just broken now as an example, the way he'd broken others, not important anymore, not useful, not in the inner ring, just one of the little people who get made examples of, if it would end in anything but hell. Pain alone can break people and leave them never what they were. Pain and fear will do it a lot faster. Something walks into Carissa's office, wearing Mayol's face. It's holding itself together better than the last thing Carissa saw wearing Mayol's face. It can probably be useful at administrative tasks so long as it doesn't need to show initiative. It is very terrified of Carissa Sevar. It spent a long time being terrified of her.
Please sit down. I'm not going to hurt you.
It will obey, of course. If anyone asks it whether Carissa Sevar will hurt it, it now knows that the answer to be given is no.
I'm working on better write-ups of the project. Who's in charge of what? Who should be in charge of what if they are indisposed or called away or turn traitor or vanish mysteriously in the dead of night? I realized that you're the best person for this. You're the one who's been keeping track of it already.
Yes, Chosen, it says automatically.
Abigail's notes on torture had suggestions about this, but mostly they were to only do it in the first place if you didn't really like the person and weren't going to want them to be useful afterwards. I'm not going to hurt you. Not today, not tomorrow, not even if you fuck up at something again. I'm not going to put you in a position where you might.
Yes, Chosen. A flicker of trust in Carissa Sevar that once was, but that wasn't real, was it? She was a thing that hurts you after all. The thought dies before it can form much of a connected chain. Possibly if this person were not hurt, a few times sequentially, when he otherwise expected strongly to be hurt, he would start to be able to hear promises again.
I'm sorry.
Chosen, he says. The parts of him that detect heresy light up. They did not get much use in torment or shattering by it. But very quickly the sequelae run into the horror that is everything about or relating to Carissa Sevar, and that thought goes nowhere.
Not very sorry. I'm allowed to do this to people. Hell does this to people. You and Subarak set me up to come back and do this, and you were pleased enough when I was doing it to one of the thugs on security. But you didn't, in fact, have occasion to do it to me, and what you did do for me was your best, mostly, accounting for how humans are terrible at everything. Did you know it is heretical to say that Carissa Sevar will show any soul mercy? And she's making this about herself, saying what she wants to talk about instead of what she thinks might actually help Mylol, who she does actually want to help. I am sorry because I hurt you out of ignorance of how to get what I wanted. I wish I hadn't.
Something inside him hurts. He shuts it down out of a vague sense that letting this thing hurt will lead to other hurtings. It seems like something that might scream at Carissa Sevar if it were allowed a voice, so it's dangerous. He doesn't know if, yes, chosen is an allowable thing to say here. If this is real, silence would be allowed. If it's fake, what does he say how to get out of hurting if it's fake? I owe you obedience, sir. You owe me nothing.
I owe it to every soul I own to make them stronger and better, and make them into the greatest devils they can be, the greatest devils in all of hell.
If he says yes, chosen, that's heresy. If he says it's heresy, that seems like it might lead to hurting. He doesn't know what to say. No options. Fear rising. From somewhere, maybe, a last real remnant of Ferrer Mylol manages to say, and it's strange how it comes out. If you want him to be useful, you should order him to just start working.
I do want that, but I also want a bunch of other things. Humans, muddled. You know, we've had that conversation once or twice.
His mind reaches for memory. It's a memory of arguing with Carissa Sevar, flinches back as if burned. The fragment of the real Ferrer Mylol that spoke, its attempt at advice ignored, sees that it's not being listened to here and retreats back, possibly for good.
Is there some promise that if you had it would make it easier to do your job?
Not to be hurt again, he doesn't say it. It's too obviously a thing you don't say in Chiliacs if you don't trust the person you're talking to a lot when you say it. If Carissa Sevar has detect thoughts running, she'll see it, but not otherwise. I don't know, Chosen. Lots of wants rise up, get shut down before they can even turn into words, because he obviously cannot have those things might hurt to think them, will definitely hurt to say them.
She's absolutely having his mind read. How else do you understand people? I am not going to hurt you again. She already said that, but apparently it didn't sink in.
Obviously not, it's just words. There was once a man who knew a Carissa Sevar and thought her words meant something. But then it turned out she was just made of cheliacs, so now her words are cheliacs words. Yes, Chosen.
Would you like a week off to rest, not be around me, not be around Project Lawful?
Yes, says his mind. It's not a very loud yes. He has no idea if that helps somebody like him. No, Chosen, say his verbal reflexes, and something else inside him shuts it down, because if he actually says that, then a week of not rest will happen to him. Oh, wait. She didn't say that he could have it, just to ask if he wanted it, so she'll laugh at him if he says yes and then say he can't have it. That makes a sort of sense. If she wants him to hurt that way, he should give his hurting to her and not make her go looking for it. It seems like a safe way to be hurt, even if it leads into more hurting. It's probably, ha, go do this paperwork instead. Hurting and not actual hurting. Sounds nice, he says, after a long delay to compute all that.
If hypothetically there were such a thing as evil Dath Ilan, it would have invented the concept of post-torture therapist for reasons of sheer economic loss prevention. Cheliacs is not evil Dath Ilan, a fact which has both upsides and downsides. Nobody in this conversation will have the thought occur to them that there's any available remedy for Mayol but rest, and in fact, there isn't.
Well, that's progress? All right. I am putting you on leave for a week. I am going to tell someone to teleport you somewhere peaceful and quiet with extremely boring slaves and no responsibilities. I'll figure this org plan out myself.
Huh? Acknowledged? He doesn't get it. Is he supposed to go back to his bedroom now?
I'll send someone for the teleport once I've set it up.
Acknowledged. Is she annoyed that he's still here? Will she be more annoyed if he tries to leave without being ordered to go? That sounded like a dismissal, and if he was dismissed, he can be not around Carissa Sevar anymore. No, can't risk it. She'll tell him to go if he's supposed to go. You can't get away from the Carissa Sevar. She can leave, but you can't make her go away. Mylol tried to wish her away a lot before, and that didn't work.
You can go.
He walks out faster than he walked in.
If Asmodeus doesn't think she did anything wrong there, if Asmodeus thinks that's fine, that's not a good line of thought. How about, instead, she does her job and gets this report done, and figures out someone to be project administration? Shit. After a while of wallowing pointlessly, because all the wisdom in the world can't fix being human and contemptible and stupid, she ends up writing Alexite Thrune, entirely on the grounds that he is not, as far as she knows, completely incompetent and isn't Abigail or Aspexia. She wants a recommendation for a project administrator. Does he know anyone? She also wants a recommendation for a nice, quiet retreat somewhere with absolutely no important people. Does he have a recommendation for that? It'll go out in the evening teleport. She informs the other project administration logistics staff that Miyol is on medical leave because she broke him, maybe irretrievably, and is now seeing if it's retrievable. She wants to have some more appealing explanation than that, but, well, if she wanted to be able to tell people something better, she'd have had to do something better. She spends most of the evening on project administration and then much of the night on refining her headband assembly line to reflect people's idiocy actual use. And then she gets a deep slumber cast when she still can't sleep after that.
Somewhere else is a person now wearing a +6 intelligence headband with an owl's wisdom and eagle's splendor cast on him beside. He is, in Galarian terms, +7SD intelligence, if not quite +7SD Thinkumpf. Out of Dath Ilan, he'd be +5SD intelligence. He started out +0.8SD for his world in Thinkumpf, and his intelligence score, if measured there, would be a bit above that. And then taking him up +6 intelligence points locally boosts his intelligence as such by around +4SD in Dath Ilani terms. The standard deviations are narrower in Dathilan, what with all the selection they've been doing on their existing variants, and many environmental causes of variable negative effects having been optimized away. There are aspects of Thinkumph not accounted for by intelligence and wisdom and splendor. That person doesn't match a Dathilani genius on those dimensions, but in them he's also well above a Galarian person selected for equivalent pre-augmentation ability stats. A Galarian person selected to match his Galarian ability stats is an outlier on those ability stats, and has probably regressed towards the mean on unmeasured aspects of cognition. This person comes from a world that tried hard to select on actual Thinkumph. His base ability stats in Galarian are only the side effect, modulo slightly higher intelligence and significantly lower wisdom than would be considered average in his world. He's been issued with a cognitive toolkit that can use much more intelligence than the standard cognitive toolkit out of Galarian can absorb. His toolkit includes adequate base knowledge for him to somewhat adapt that cognitive toolkit to having more intelligence available. On occasions when he has time to think and strategize and his thoughts span over time and accumulate, the resulting viewpoint may no longer be described in a way understandable to the average person out of Galarian or even an above-average wizard. Or maybe you could describe it if you were willing to go on at sufficiently great length and do a lot of translation, but it would not be fun to hear about. He is now actually doing things like considering the top 12 possibilities and putting numerical probabilities on them. That person was leaving Chiliax mostly alone while he went about his other business. Then Asmodia vanished and Carissa Sevar sold her soul. Separating aside emotional responses, even on the larger game board it no longer seems particularly like he ought to leave Chiliax alone. Evidently, things will go on happening there even if he leaves it alone. Subsequent reports of a nobles' gathering in Chiliax are not reassuring. Taking both reports and the observations within reports at face value, Carissa is becoming relatively less aligned. She has an artifact headband to become a cognitive power opposing him, and also with some of the Dath Ilani toolkit. Ione can report of her pre-Nefriti knowledge that a soul-sold Carissa probably now has at least 3 wishes with which to enhance herself. Doing nothing and hoping nothing happens was always a questionable option at best. He discards it now.
If you wish to support this AI reading and others like it, please visit patreon.com/AskWhoCastsAI. Any help is appreciated. And thank you to executive producer John Doe 7776059.